Legacy Builders, welcome to the Fair Use chapter of the IP for Business Blueprint course. I'm Jenn McNeely with JWM Designs and Marketing, and in this video lesson, I'm going to explain fair use, what it is, the factors to determine fair use, and how to know if your use of a copyrighted material is protected by fair use. This is a standalone chapter in this course that will get you ready for the chapters that are all about OPIP, other people's intellectual property. So let's get into it. Why now? In business, the likelihood of you brushing up against someone else's intellectual property is very high. Whether it's using photos or graphics in your advertisements for your business, creating content for your blog, or creating DIY craft projects with supplies from different brands, you need to understand how to use other people's intellectual property without infringing on their rights. The best way to avoid infringing on other people's property is to get permission to use the protected materials. But that's not always the easiest and most efficient way to go about using other people's property. Under certain circumstances, you don't need permission of the intellectual property owner to use their work. What is fair use? At its most basic of definitions, fair use is a legal principle that allows for the use of copyrighted work without first getting permission of the copyright's owner. Generally, if you use copyrighted materials without permission of the owner, you are infringing on the owner's exclusive right to use the copyrighted material. What fair use provides is a way for you to use the copyrighted material under certain circumstances without infringing on the owner's rights and therefore avoid putting you at risk for potential liability. Examples of fair use of copyrighted material would be a critique or review of a protected work, for educational or nonprofit purposes, for news reporting, or for research. It is important to note that only a court can determine whether a use is fair or not. Courts evaluate fair use claims on a case-by-case basis, and the outcome depends on the specific facts of each fair use claim. There is no hard and fast rule that will determine the outcome of a fair use claim, but instead a multi-factor balancing test is used for each case. There are 4 main factors that courts are going to consider when deciding the issue of fair use. 1. Purpose and character of the use. 2. The amount and substantiality of the portion of the copyrighted work borrowed. 3. The nature of the copyrighted work. 4. The effect of the use of the work on the potential market for or value of the copyrighted material. I know, that's a lot. I'll explain each of those factors in just a second. I think it's important to note that fair use is not an affirmative right, meaning you can't just know something is fair use simply by weighing those factors yourself. Think of fair use as a defense against legal action, and the courts, not the copyright owner or you, determines whether your use of that copyright is in fact fair use. Remember, the uncertainty regarding the use of a copyrighted material can always be avoided if you get the proper permissions from the copyright owner. Let's say that you are watching this video and you think that you may have infringed on someone else's copyright. Take a deep breath and don't panic. You should know that if you have used someone else's copyright without permission, but you genuinely believe that your use was a fair use, you would likely be considered an innocent infringer. Innocent infringers typically don't have to pay damages to the copyright owner, but are required to stop using the copyright material. Again, this can all be avoided if you get permission. Let's talk a bit more about the 4 main factors used to determine fair use. Purpose and character of your use. This factor is considered the most important of all of the 4 factors. The key issue here is whether your use of the copyrighted material is transformative, meaning did you add something new to the work to change its expression or meaning? Did you use the work to transform its original value by creating a new understanding, aesthetic, or insight? For example, a parody of a work is transformative because it ridicules the original work by altering the meaning or the expression. I want you to think of Weird Al Yankovic in his parody songs. The more transformative the use of the work, the more likely it is of fair use. Your use of copyrighted material doesn't have to transform the original work's expression or meaning, as long as it transforms the purpose of the work. For example, one purpose for using a copyrighted work could be for education or scholarship. Then it may also qualify as transformative work because the work is being subjected to review or commentary. Nature of the copyrighted work. This factor boils down to whether the work is fact-based or for entertainment. Typically, informational-based works like news articles, scholarly works, or scientific journals provide a stronger case for fair use because the government wants to encourage the free flow of ideas and the creation of new scientific works. For example, multiple authors can write a biography about the same person and use essentially the same factual information. What separates one biography from another are the editorial judgments each author makes regarding the facts that they consider to be more compelling and the perspectives that they wish to convey in the work. It is important to note that when a work is unpublished, the fair use of that work is a lot narrower because authors have the right to control the first appearance of their artistic expression. Amount and substantiality of the portion of the work used. Under this factor, less is more, and it's a lot safer. The less of a copyright work you use, the better chance it falls under fair use. But that is not a guarantee, and sometimes the quality of the portion used is more important than the quantity that is being copied. For example, think of the most memorable parts of your favorite song or line from a movie scene. It would likely not be fair use to copy, "I want the truth, you can't handle the truth." With that being said, if you are creating a parody of a copyrighted work, then you will likely need a substantial portion of the original work in order to create the parody that conjures up the original work the parody is based upon. Effect of the use on the potential market. In other words, how will the copy affect the value and marketability of the original work? The effect can be actual or potential and does not depend on whether the original work is currently being marketed. If the new work deprives the owner of the copyright of income or the ability to explore new markets, the fair use claim will likely fail. For example, if a sculptor copies a photographer's photographs and creates sculptures from those photographs that earn him an income, even if the photographer had not considered making any sculptures, so long as the potential for the photographer to make money creating sculptures from those photographs existed, the sculptor's unauthorized use of those photographs is not a fair use. Common misconceptions about fair use. Now that you know what fair use is and the factors used by courts to determine fair use, I want to go over a couple of common mistakes people make when it comes to copyright materials. Acknowledging the source. Acknowledging the source is not the same thing as getting permission. I'm going to repeat that. Acknowledging the source is not the same thing as getting permission. Oftentimes, people think that if they copy the work but acknowledge the owner of the original work, they have not infringed on another person's intellectual property. That is simply not true. There is no substitute for getting permission to use copyrighted work. Saying that you don't own the rights to the music you display on your social media accounts does not change the fact that you are infringing on someone else's copyright if you don't have a license to use that music. Plagiarism. Plagiarism is not the same thing as copyright infringement. Plagiarism is not a legal term, and it's not a violation of any law, but it is a violation of ethical standards. When someone poses as the originator of a work that he or she did not create, he or she is a plagiarist. While a plagiarist can infringe on a copyright, they can also plagiarize without infringing if the work that they've copied is in the public domain. An example would be if I posted a copy of William Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream on my blog and said that I wrote it. I would be a plagiarist, but I would not be a copyright infringer because the play is in the public domain. Speaking of public domain, any work that is not protected by copyright law is in the public domain and can be copied without permission. Disclaimers. Claiming fair use or using a disclaimer does not mean that you are not infringing on someone else's intellectual property. Remember, only a court can determine whether something is fair use, and just because you post a disclaimer saying no copyright infringement intended doesn't mean you aren't infringing. But it's not a bad thing to have a disclaimer if you are using copyrighted content. I've created a template disclaimer and included it in your downloadable e-workbook for this course. While it will not prevent potential takedown orders or lawsuits, it may assist you in your defense of an infringement claim. So how does knowing all of this stuff about fair use help me in my business? As I mentioned previously, the fair use doctrine is a defense to a claim of copyright infringement. However, it is important to know that a court finding that a particular use of copyrighted material qualifies as fair use is subjective, and there is no guarantee that you will prevail with a fair use defense. Many small business owners use copyrighted materials in their businesses without permission on a daily basis, and their use of the copyrighted materials fly under the radar of the copyright's owner. Some copyright owners won't pursue an infringement claim because they either view the unauthorized use of their work as a benefit to them, like fan fiction or a viral video posted by an influencer, or they don't think that the use has any economic impact on their use of the copyright. From my experience, there are two instances when owners are more likely to pursue legal action against a copyright infringer. The first reason is that the new work causes the owner to lose money or value in the original work. The second reason is that the copyright owner is either offended by the way their work is being used or is offended by the person who is actually using their work. Why is understanding the basics about fair use so important for business owners? Let me ask you, do you plan to use only creative works that you make? Will you use software like Microsoft Office or Adobe Creative Cloud? Will every graphic, picture, design on your website or marketing material be original works created by you? Do you really want to go through the time and cost of creating and publishing a website or marketing campaign only to have to take it down because you didn't get permission to use the copyright materials in those marketing materials or on your website? Do you have the time and the resources to defend yourself from an infringement lawsuit? Knowing the rules of the road, the potential pitfalls to keep a watchful eye out for will benefit you greatly as you grow your business. Don't press publish until you know that you have permission to use the work or that your use of the work will likely fall within the realm of fair use. Let's recap. In this lesson, I talked about fair use as a defense to an infringement claim, the factors to determine fair use, and how to know if your use of copyright material is protected by fair use. Your action steps for this lesson is to do inventory of your website, social media posts, and marketing materials to make sure you have the right to use those items. If you see something that you posted that may be a bit iffy, look to see if you can find the author of the original work and get permission, or you can just go ahead and take it down. Also, consider adding copyright disclaimers I included in the workbook to your online and your printed materials. I hope you guys found this lesson on the fair use doctrine to be helpful in your understanding of potential ways to use other people's intellectual property. In the next chapter, we're going to dive deeper and discuss ways to get permission to use other people's intellectual property. Please post your questions or comments on this video in the comment area below. You can also post questions and comments to the private Facebook group for this course. Remember, you can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and my handles to those sites are also listed in the course resources area as well as your e-notebook. Well, that's it for this lesson. Until I see you in the next lesson, let's keep building, y'all.